Okay, this is Travis Wayne Goodsell. I'm at an LDS.org link of the PDFs of the Scripture Masteries. So we're going to go over the suppression that takes place when people study their scriptures. The Scripture Mastery is intended to isolate certain scriptures from the whole context of Scripture, pointing out highlights, and intended for memorization purposes and search purposes. When I was in seminary, we'd have scripture chase, where it was like a competition, and all of the seminary students in the area or in the stake, there wasn't that many in the stake, so it had to be a multi-stake thing. Yeah, this is the method of studying in the LDS Church. And as I've said in other videos, all of my institute courses at Rick's College did not count as credit hours when I went to the University of Lethbridge in Canada and took Bible studies as my bachelor's. They did not recognize it. This particular set of cards, which is on 50 pages, is from the Book of Mormon, as you can see here on the screen if you've got a big enough screen and you're not using your cell phone. So the first one is 1 Nephi 3:7, and it just gives a little short clip from the passage. Doesn't quote the whole passage. It's about I will go and do. The only problem is that it's missing and become or be. You can't just go and do, you've got to actually be. The context is what they try to have you do, but it's not the context necessary. Here they have the Lord commanded Nephi and his brothers to return to Jerusalem to get the brass plates. That's a little misleading. It was Lehi commanded Nephi, because Lehi was told in a dream to have his sons go get the brass plates. And so, yeah, there's error number one right off the bat. Doctrine or principle. The Lord prepares a way for us to keep His commandments. This is also misleading. The commandment is love. Plain and simple. This is misleading in the sense that this scripture about I will go and do, as the Lord commands, for I know that the Lord giveth no commandment unto the children of men, save He shall prepare a way for them to fulfill all that He commands them. That's the key part that's missing in this doctrine or principle, is the part of becoming what the Lord wants you to do. That's why He has you do things. Here, the church is trying to present commandments as what the leaders of the church order you to do, which is to be silent about what goes on in the temple, to not listen to social media so that you don't find out that the church is false, those types of things, which are not commandments. And what this is talking about is a personal revelation. When you get ideas and inspiration, this is what is being referred to here as the principle, and how you liken the scriptures unto yourself. The leaders of the church are supposed to help people in the church, members of the church, to receive personal revelation and how they can apply it and fulfill it in their lives, as the scripture talks about. I'm going to read the quote from 1 Nephi rather than give my memorization of it. 1 Nephi, 3. I doubt you can see the scripture thing that I've got on the screen. Understand. Oh man, I'm trapped. I've got the timer thing over the the text. All right, there we go. And it came to pass that I, Nephi, said unto my father, I will go and do the things which the Lord hath commanded, for I know that the Lord giveth no commandments unto the children of men, save he shall prepare a way for them that they may accomplish the thing which he commandeth them. That's the point here. It's about fulfilling, accomplishing, completing, finishing, if I hadn't already said that, what the Lord inspires you to do. So if you're an author, as I am, when you get inspiration to write a book, you have to not just start typing, you have to do research and assemble it all together, and then when you finish, you publish it so that others can see the fruits of your inspiration for that particular book. And other people will know you by your fruits. Unless you use Amazon and you're trying to publish ancient fonts. Please have mercy on those of us who do that process. It's not our fault. And so this is incorrect. The Lord doesn't prepare a way for people to keep the commandments. It's to fulfill the commandments. And that's the very first scripture for the Book of Mormon, and the church gets it wrong. And it's actually the church service missionaries who made these. They were specific to the CES, church educational system, not the church with Sunday school and priesthood and relief society and primary manuals. Already members of the church are being led astray. Teenagers are being led astray with the very first card that they're supposed to be working on. So instead of teenagers being taught that they need to follow through and see the results of their inspiration, to be able to examine it to see if it produces good works, good fruit, or if it takes away other people's liberty, life, and property. Because if it does those things, then you know that it was bad inspiration. So when a bishop who gets inspiration to have you buy a product that he's selling on the side, and ends up scamming the members of his ward, well, obviously that means that bishop was not a good guy, or a bishop who in the news lately is a sex offender, sex trafficker. So you know that he was not inspired by God to be a sex trafficker, even though he tried to claim, I was trying to handle these women, help them. No. By his fruits we know him. And this isn't about being obedient. It's about obedience brings blessings. And the blessings of obedience, which is the doing part, is the good works. You know, if you're an architect, you have to get inspired for an architectural design for a home. And if you follow the right spirit, you would have had education on all of the techniques of design, as well as the physics behind placing beams in certain places. All that is essential in designing a good home. And of course, the primary song, the wise man built his house upon a rock rather than sand. New subdivisions, those of you who lived in them know about house settling, or ground settling rather, and then the house gets warped with the ground settling. That's because the original construction workers did not make the ground solid enough to keep the house from settling, and that's just a lazy man's construction job, and thus you know them by their fruits, that you don't want to hire them for other homes if this is what kind of quality of work they're doing. So then they have the application. I already told you what the application should be, but they're now saying, what has the Lord commanded you to do that some might consider to be difficult? It doesn't matter if it's difficult or if it's easy. So you just have to finish it. And so for me, I've got vineyards of inspiration now. Seeds from all sorts of fruits that I've been planting my whole life. And so I've got many book ideas, I've got many vlog ideas. This is one example right here. I got inspired to show Mormons how the scripture mastery cards are leading you astray and not adequately instructing you on how to study the scriptures. The Book of Mormon, for example. And so here they did have a question in the second part. How did he prepare a way for you to accomplish it? So it contradicts the doctrine or principle, because they don't talk about accomplishment in there, do they? They just say keep the commandments, which is obedience. And then of course people think they're clever when they talk about, well, if God asked you to try to, or to push a rock up a mountain, do you complain about the task, or do you just do it? And then they talk about some people that say, well, God comes down and then says, I didn't ask you to get it there, I just asked you to push it. And other nonsense like that. So those are dangerous things when you try to come up with metaphors or parables to justify your false doctrine or principle. So you got to make sure the doctrine and principle is correct first before you then start throwing in parables for people. Yeah, as a teenager, this kind of thing confused me, because I would read the doctrine or principle and then read the application and then be confused, because which is it? And then, they don't have the full scripture here, do they? They just says, I will go and do. And that makes it tough. But here they have on the back side the full scripture. And they even include the footnotes, but they don't show you what the footnotes are. So that's lame. That was just a lazy man's way of doing things, rather than taking out the little footnotes. So it pretty much is useless. You have to go to the scriptures anyway. So it's not really a good cliff note. But also the context that is missing is that Nephi is a young boy when he is asked to go get the brass plates. That context is not indicated here. Everybody in the church assumes Nephi was in Jerusalem when Lehi left. Go back and read it very carefully. It talks about Lehi. It talks about taking his family, which consisted of Laman, Lemuel, and Sam, and of course the mother, Sarai. And they leave. And then it talks about Lehi dwelling in a tent, and then it changes in person in the text. And Nephi is now saying, and now I, Nephi, was, let's find it. We all live in hills submarine. 1 second, Nephi, what are you doing? Okay, whoops, wrong chapter. Alright. Okay, in chapter 2 of 1 Nephi, chapter 2, and it came to pass, the Lord commanded my father, even in a dream, that he should take his family and depart in the wilderness. And it came to pass that he was obedient to the word of the Lord, and he did. It's a past tense, which indicates that he fulfilled it. He fulfilled the Lord's commandment. And it came to pass he departed into the wilderness and took his family. And in verse 5, here it is. And he came down. Notice the pronoun. He came down. Not we came down. He came down by the borders near the shore of the Red Sea, and he traveled in the wilderness in the borders which are nearer the Red Sea. And he did travel in the wilderness with his family. His family. This is Nephi talking here, according to the context. Notice the pronouns. This is significant, and every Mormon has missed this, which consisted of my mother. Now he's using a personal pronoun, isn't he? My mother, Sarai, and my elder brothers, who were Laman, Lemuel, and Sam. He left out himself. Why? Because he hadn't been born. If he had been a baby, he would have said we, and would have mentioned him as a baby. He is taking the information from his father's record, the book of Lehi. And let's see, where's my father dwelt in the tent? He's talking about the wickedness of his sons, except for Sam. And 15, and my father dwelt in the tent. My father dwelt in the tent. Not Nephi dwelt in the tent. My father dwelt in a tent. 16, and it came to pass that I, personal pronoun, Nephi, being exceedingly young. See what happened there? This is crucial in studying the Book of Mormon, and every single Mormon has missed it. You look at the cartoon videos in the Book of Mormon, Nephi is leaving Jerusalem with his family in Lehi. You see the Book of Mormon movie, again, Nephi is in Jerusalem leaving with his family. Everyone has missed it. And I believe even the Australian movie also missed it, but I never heard them actually finishing. They were working on it. A dad had a family member, cousin or something like that, that was involved in that production. But that was like 30 years ago when I heard about that. Alright. So this is the context that the church is purposely leaving out. Of course, they got to simplify it for these cards, but I hope you get the understanding that when you do actual study of the scriptures, that you understand the proper context, that you don't just assume because other people have told you what to believe in. If you just go to seminary and you listen to what the teacher tells you, and you don't bother doing the studying for yourself from the Book of Mormon, you're going to get the answers wrong in Institute at BYU if you take Marlon K. Jensen's class. He's no longer teaching at Rick's, but that's who my teacher was, and I didn't do too well in his test taking on the Book of Mormon. And that was before my mission. And so, yeah, apparently my mission magically restored all understanding of the Book of Mormon. I can't explain it because I corrected the Book of Mormon board game, trivia game, with an incident that I had in my first family. So I've talked about it in another video, so don't need to worry about it here. Alrighty, so yeah, this is just a sample on how to fact check what the church tells you to believe in. Don't just trust whatever they tell you, because as a result, members of the church will have wrong information and inaccurate information, and thus produce many errors. Remember, when Nephi has his vision of the tree of life, he also has his vision of the great and abominable church, and he sees the Bible going through the great and abominable church, and they take out the plain and precious things, and my weakness, getting so much information in my head that I don't have it written down to follow, and thus lose track of what I was talking about. And so sorry about that. So unless I keep talking and take up more time rather than my intended intention, otherwise I'd have to stop this video and go back and listen to it and figure out what it was I was supposed to say, then come back here and start up the video again, and blah blah blah. So I'm not going to do that. But had something to do with the, I don't know. Alright, whatever. Sorry about that. And I'm not picking up from here, so it was an inspiration that I had, and I wasn't quick enough to fulfill it, and as a result, I failed to finish it. And so I'd have to go back to try to repiece it together to finish it. So there you go. There's an example of application. That when you get an idea, you get it finished as fast as you can, or you get it written down on paper so that you can not forget. And so in my case, with all the ideas that I have lots of pieces of paper as a result. And yeah, it's frustrating because of the lack of time and the need for sleep, as we're getting to 9 o'clock right now. So, alrighty, I would like to get into scripture study as well. My intention was to keep this short as possible. However, but yeah, one of the things that you identified here was grammar study. Studying the grammar, identifying the parts of speech, because that is crucial for interpretation. Interpretation does not belong with the leaders of the church. If we cannot understand the language of the prophets and the scriptures, then how are we going to understand the prophets and the scriptures explaining the prophets and the scriptures to us? It's a useless argument. And so that's the one thing you need to know, is that if you know your language, then you can understand what is written in your language. Don't be fooled by thinking that only the leaders of the church can explain your own language to you. You are all taught English grammar. So each and every one of you can understand whatever is in your language. The next thing you need to know is character identification. You need to know who Nephi is, as you see here. Who is Nephi? So you got to go back to the beginning of the record. Nephi explains who he is, and who is his father. You have to get more of an understanding of who he is. And so, yes, in the beginning, a read over of the text is a good idea. I'm not able to do that. I have to annotate as I go along. But maybe for others, reading over the book first to get a general understanding of what is going on and who the characters are will help. The Book of Mormon is tricky in that they'll talk about some characters, and then they'll go to some other characters, and then they'll come back to the original characters. The sons of Mosiah, for example, are in that manner, and Alma's son, and Alma, and so those are other things to watch out for. If we were using, well, yeah, the Book of Mormon claims to be a translation in English from Egyptian records. This right here, Nephi, the book of Nephi, is from the small plates, if you read the context. And as a result, this was in Egyptian. And so if this was truly in Egyptian, you would have to study Egyptian in order to identify if this really is a translation from Egyptian. And if it corresponds with the 1769 King James Version of the Bible, even the errors, then you know you're dealing with plagiarism and not a translation from an Egyptian document. Because why would these people who came from Jerusalem at 600 BC and make it to the Americas be quoting the messed up translation through the Great and Abominable Church? That doesn't make any sense. And so those are things you need to check for if you're going to go around telling people that the Book of Mormon is true. And as a matter of translation from Egyptian plates made by the American Indians of ancient date. And so this is the context you need to understand. And then there's other things to do with studying the scriptures as well, and I won't get to that. I'll just leave it here at 30 minutes. But I hope you understand that scripture study is more than just reading over the book and believing whatever your teachers tell you to believe in. Okay, yeah, we'll end it here. I'm now curious as to what I was wanting to talk about. I remembered the stumbling block. The Nephi's vision of the Tree of Life and the Great and Abominable Church, messing up the Bible. That mess up caused a stumbling block to the Gentiles, those who were Christian, who followed the Bible, and even the Jews who also follow the Bible. And Islam also utilizes the Bible in their Quran. There's some differences, but they believe in the Bible. They recognize the New Testament too. They recognize Jesus as a prophet or a teacher. So so if you don't properly study your Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants and Pearl of Great Price, and you just believe whatever you want to believe, and or believe what other people tell you to believe, not fact-checking them, the Book of Mormon will turn into a stumbling block rather than a guide to correct precepts. And so the scripture mastery, as a result, is becoming a stumbling block for members because of the errors that are in them. So people are capable of not needing scripture mastery cards. They can make their own. So I knew I could figure it out if I went back to the video, because it was recorded. So I just had to refer back to the records to figure out what I was wanting to say. See?